All right, today we are diving into a topic where the biggest dangers are the ones you literally cannot see. We're talking about confined spaces, and trust me, it's a term that is way more specific and way more deadly than most people realize.
So let's just start with this. Take a look at this tank. It seems totally harmless, right? It's empty, but a space just like this could kill you in a matter of seconds. And that's the whole paradox of confined spaces. The real danger has nothing to do with what you can see. It's all about what you can't see, can't smell, and can't taste.
So how are we going to unpack all this? Well, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll figure out what a confined space actually is. Then we'll uncover those invisible killers lurking in the air. After that, we'll look at the physical traps. Then we'll get into the systems designed to keep people safe. And finally, we're going to talk about the single most important and maybe most surprising rule of rescue. Okay, first things first. What exactly are we talking about here? Because a confined space isn't just, a tight squeeze or a small room. It's a very precise legal definition. And understanding that definition is the absolute first step to preventing a disaster. Here's the official wording. Now, it really boils down to a few key things. 1, it's not a place you're meant to hang out in. 2, it's at normal air pressure. That's key. And 3, and this is the big one, it has to have a severe risk. That could be from the air itself, from chemicals, or from something that could literally swallow you whole. That's what separates a regular room from a potential tomb. For any location to be legally called a confined space, it has to pass this 4-part test. Every single box has to be checked. Is it big enough to get into? Yep. Is it not designed for you to stay in? Correct. Is it at normal pressure? Yes. And, most importantly, does it have a severe risk? If the answer is yes to all 4, then you're dealing with a confined space. If even 1 is a no, then it's not. It's that specific. All right, let's get to the heart of the matter. The most common, the most sneaky danger of all, the atmosphere. This is where basic physics becomes a silent, incredibly fast, and totally undetectable killer. Now, check this out, because this is what we call the oxygen paradox. We all get that too little oxygen is bad. Below 19.5%, your brain gets fuzzy, you pass out. But here's the kicker. Too much oxygen, anything over 23.5%, is also incredibly dangerous. It makes the air super flammable. We're talking spontaneous combustion. A spark could set your clothes on fire. So that safe range, it is a razor-thin window. And it's not just about oxygen levels. You've got these toxic gases. Let's look at 2 of the most notorious: hydrogen sulfide and carbon monoxide. H2S is heavier than air, so it sinks and creates these invisible pools of poison at the bottom of a space. And carbon monoxide, well, that's the classic silent killer. No color, no odor, no taste. It just latches onto your red blood cells over 200 times better than oxygen does, basically suffocating you from the inside out. And this quote right here, this explains the absolute treachery of hydrogen sulfide. You might smell rotten eggs at first, which is a great warning sign, but at lethal levels, the gas paralyzes the nerves in your nose. The smell literally disappears. So you think, oh, it's gone, I'm safe. But in reality, you're just seconds away from collapse. It gives you a false sense of security right before it kills you. The last invisible killer we need to talk about is the threat of explosion. We measure this with something called the lower explosive limit, or LEL. And you can see here, there's absolutely no messing around. The moment a sensor detects just 10% of the LEL, that's not 10% of the air, just 10% of the minimum amount needed to explode, work stops. It's an immediate, get out now, mandatory evacuation. The place is basically a bomb waiting to go off. Okay, so we've covered the invisible dangers in the air. But what about when the space itself is the weapon? Let's talk about the physical traps, the hazards that can crush, bury, or just plain overwhelm a worker in a split second. Yeah, these physical hazards are just as brutal. You've got engulfment, which is basically being buried alive in stuff like grain or sand. There's the risk of machinery inside the space, augers, mixers, blades, suddenly turning on. And then you have environmental factors like insane heat, deafening noise that echoes everywhere, or even nasty biological stuff in sewers. And let's just walk through how engulfment happens, because it's absolutely terrifying. Imagine in a silo, the grain on top forms a solid-looking crust, or a bridge, but underneath, there's a huge air pocket. A worker climbs in to break up a jam, they step on that crust, and it shatters. Instantly. They're pulled under, and the weight of the grain makes it impossible to even expand their chest to breathe. It is, for all intents and purposes, like being trapped in dry quicksand. So, given all these absolutely horrific ways to die, how on earth do we keep people safe? Well, it's not one single thing. It's a really robust, multi-layered system of protection. Think of it like layers of armor against both the invisible and the visible threats. Now, the most important thing to understand is this pyramid, the hierarchy of controls. It's a non-negotiable order of operations. You always start at the top. Number 1, elimination. Can we do the job without anyone ever going in? Maybe with a drone or a robot? That's always the best choice. If you absolutely have to enter, then you move to isolation, physically locking out all power sources. You work your way down the list and notice what's at the very bottom, PPE. Your mask and harness are your last line of defense, not your first. This entire system is run by 2 critical people. First, you have the competent person. Think of them as the mission planner. They're the expert who assesses all the risks, tests the air, and fills out the permit that authorizes entry. They do all their work before anyone sets foot inside. Then you have the standby person, or sentry. They are the guardian, the lifeline. They stand outside the entire time, maintaining constant watch, ready to trigger a rescue. 2 totally different jobs, both absolutely vital. And that guardian role brings us to our final and maybe the most critical section of all. This is about what happens when everything goes wrong. It's about fighting a deeply human instinct, an instinct that all too often gets people killed. A quarter, 25%. That is the estimated number of people who die in confined spaces who weren't the first victim. They were the would-be rescuers, the friends, the coworkers who saw someone go down and instinctively rushed in to help, right into the same invisible trap that got the first person. Because of that horrible statistic, we have this rule. And it is an absolute ironclad rule. The sentry, the person standing guard, is strictly forbidden from entering the space to try and pull someone out. It goes against every fiber of your being, I know. It feels completely wrong. But that law exists specifically to prevent one tragedy from becoming 2 or 3 or more. So what is that sentry supposed to do? They follow this exact disciplined procedure. Their first job is not to go in, but to hit the alarm, summon the professionals. Second, they try a non-entry rescue, using equipment like a winch or a tripod to pull the person out from the outside. And third, they communicate. They tell the incoming rescue team everything they know. Their job is to start the rescue, not to become another victim. Look, at the end of the day, all these systems, the permits, the sentries, the rescue plans, they're all there for when entry is the only option. But the true goal, the only 100% guaranteed, fail-safe solution, is to change the work itself so that a human being never has to go into one of these spaces to begin with. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about, the whole philosophy of confined space safety, of identifying hidden dangers, of planning for the worst-case scenario, of fighting your own deadly instincts. That's a really powerful way to think. So it makes you wonder, if this is the level of preparation needed for a known workplace hazard, what unavoidable risks in our own lives are we just completely failing to see? That's it for this explainer. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.